All right, we're live. Let's do this. All right. So we're just going to tie in our experiences to your role as a leader or follower. I'm going to go ahead and just go off my notes. Just an example of a legitimate power. Like I said in the previous discussion, like that. What was that example where do as I say so because I'm your dad? What were you saying, Sonia?
Oh, the leader that leads by example, not the do as I say,
Do as
not
I
as I
say,
do.
not as I do.
Right. And it applies to legitimate power. Um, I lead a band, and I mentally try to make a note of it to not be that person having legitimate power, because I want people to feel like they're empowered, and so all the I guess burden isn't on me.
Yeah,
And then what was that?
I was just gonna say, like, legitimate power, like it doesn't have to be that way. Like, it's just you have that position of like you have the power, like because of your position that you hold as the person who runs the band. Like, you don't have to lead that way, even though you have the legitimate power, even though you could. Like, I think legitimate power is where that kind of leadership works. Is like when it would actually kind of work because you have that like ranking to do that,
Right, right.
even if it's not like the best way to go about it.
So it's more about the title.
Yeah.
Just an example of expert power. I did wedding planning a little bit, and I didn't I didn't speak from like legitimate power. I made sure that I let my clients know that I'm speaking from experience. They could trust me because of my experience and my knowledge that I've acquired over the years.
I definitely found expert power definitely works, especially with Starbucks. Like, I feel like that was a really good place where people began to trust you because of the information you had, and that's kind of how you grew like a following. And that was a really effective form of like lower leadership, I think. Because I mean, obviously, that's not going to work in a larger organization, but in a smaller one, I feel like that was super effective.
Well, where I work, there's kind of a pretty decent amount of turnover between like employees doing like manual labor of moving and packaging items. So coercive power, even though the book kind of says it's not, like, it's kind of draining on people. It's just that we have such strict like times for trucks need to be loaded by this, and boxes need to be taped this way because food, so like air, like bacteria can't get in. That's actually somewhat effective, yeah, in doing this, but obviously me as calling myself a leader here, I like to think that I lead from referent power and people like listening to what I have to say, but obviously we're all going to say that about ourselves, hopefully. I don't know. And yes,
I think the referent power is really like plays a big role when you've been in a position for like a long time. Like, I think when I started out as a shift, like I definitely didn't feel that. Like, I had a completely new staff that like I was supposed to be leading, and I didn't have a reputation with them. So like I didn't start out as a referent, like having referent power, but like now I feel that I do because I like have that reputation with all of my peers and my subordinates and my upper management. Like, I have referent power because I've been there so long.
I feel like referent power also kind of stems from charismatic leadership, where like 'cause that's kind of just the leadership where you just gain kind of the respect of your followers through just good communication and building like a strong bond because people just kind of like you, and you're like, you just, they trust you and they know that you care about them and you're not like leading them down a dark hole or anything. I kind of feel like that is basically what referent power is. It just comes from charismatic leadership, if you had to put one of these leadership terms to it.
I think the referent power, like, leader, like, is also the people that, like, it's not a chore to listen to them, or it's not a chore to do what they say. They are inspiring you to be that way, and you want to do those things. You want to impress them, and it's not a chore to like have to listen to what they're saying. And you're just motivated because of who they are, too. So
I agree.
Absolutely.
For sure. Just because when you have a referent leader, it makes it that much more easier to listen to them, to like want to follow them from the perspective of a follower versus, any other type of. I'd have to say my least favorite type of leader would probably be like a reward leader, or someone who kind of like taunts you with like, a higher place in the company or more money or something like that versus, genuine like being inspired by them, for sure.
For me personally, like I find that my reward power, or like when I'm doing like reward, I'm rewarding baristas with like being in a desirable position. Like we have different spots like for each shift, like where you can be. You can be making the drinks, you can be like stocking the stuff that we need to make the drinks, or you can be bringing people up. And some people like positions more than others. Some are worse than like to other people. So I reward kind of like, oh, if we can get this done, like you guys can be in your favorite spots, or I'll even reward them with like, hey, we'll all take a break. If we can get this done by a certain time, we'll all take a break and eat a cookie together. So like, I think reward power when it's something bigger, like, oh, well, if you can do this, like you can move up, and it's kind of an empty promise, it's bad. But I feel like for a little like group goal and like littler things like that, I think reward power can be useful for those. Like, hey, let's all get a goal done by a certain time and we'll take a break. And I think that's kind of good, but like I totally see what you're saying, where like in bigger situations it can be harmful almost.
Like for my work, reward power is good, like because on Friday, we're not like open for a set amount of time. We just have to work until our job is done. So like if we all come in, we're all in the break room, we kind of just be like, all right, I'll do this, you do this, we're going to do this. And like maybe we can get out here 30 minutes early on Friday. That's a very good motivator for people, especially with like traffic in the Bay Area. Like for the people that live in the East Bay, I can tell them like, yo, you get on that bridge 30 minutes early. Let's just all work together real fast. Like I'll do this, you do that. They like that.
And I think that will go back to your referent power too, where it's just like you have that reputation with them, and like your referent power and like your reward power like work together in that case, kind of.
Yeah, I definitely don't feel like reward power is a bad thing in all situations. I mean, think about like company bonuses, or when companies, award stocks when a company's had a super profitable year. Like, I just feel like it can be a way to like share in successes and be like, hey, company's doing great, so we're gonna kind of, pass it off onto you. So I guess it really just depends on the situation and the company and who the leader is, and is everyone getting this reward, or is it just, hey, you're my favorite, or is it, hey, we met a team goal, let's everyone get a Christmas bonus.
Yeah, it seems like maybe group rewards would be beneficial, but when there's like individualized rewards, that might get a little tricky. Maybe
absolutely.
Yeah. I know that we'll do like Starbucks itself will send out incentives like, hey, if you guys can reach this goal, we'll send your store so much money that you can do whatever you want with your choice. So like I work in a smaller store, there's only 10 of us, so we can take that money, we can all go out to dinner, we can go have a store movie night, and those are kind of cool. As like I think group reward I think is really good.
And group reward is good because I think I probably read about this in another leadership class. I don't know why this is popping in my head now, but like if it's the whole group is getting rewarded instead of just individuals, there's not as much reason for people to not share their ideas or share what's making them successful because they're competing against other people. So if you have 3 salesmen, you say only one of you gets the reward. One guy's figured out a trick to sell the most. He's like, I'm not sharing it with these other 2. Like, but if you say if all 3 of you guys reach X amount of sales, then you guys all 3 get this, then he's going to pass along the secret. Only helps the company too.
And that can kind of go back to like last chapter or the last week where it talks about selfishness. And like, even though we're talking about like kind of followers in this case with reward power, I think that like even in followers, like there's a leader amongst followers. And I think that if we don't promote selfishness within them, like to be against each other, like that will be helpful. So exactly what you're saying, maybe that's a good point.
Yeah.
We're at 10 minutes, by the way.
Definitely.
You guys feel like legitimate power, even though it may seem negative, do you think it could be positive?
Not bad at all.
I think it can be positive. I think people with legitimate power have to work harder for it because, like, if you go back to like one of the first things it talks about appointed leaders versus like leaders that naturally just like rise to the occasion. I think legitimate power like are people who are appointed to it, so it can go poorly, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah, I feel like they would need to acquire referent power at the same time. But even though they might have that position, they still need to be that role model, like it says in the book.
Yeah.
It really depends on the person and personality as well, just because, you know, you could have a legitimate power and it's just not a good person versus, and so everything plays hand in hand. Like you could have legitimate power and reference power, but at the end of the day, it still comes down to who they are as a person.
I
Without
feel like
the power.
legitimate power, though, is like you can really only get that power based off of credentials. It's not as much about like your charisma or any personality thing like referent powers or leading. You know, like I feel like someone with legitimate power is probably like an older senior person with the company and has definitely put in their share of time and like obviously been successful and knows what they're, you know, because that's kind of just seems like that's the only way you get legitimate power. There's no other trait that like you know, it's not like a great man theory sort of power where you're just like a born leader or that people like.
Well, legitimate power can also come from people who are just like just starting out. They're young and they don't have any experience, like, and they're appointed this spot of power. I think is like, I'm pretty sure that's what like legitimate power is. Like, I don't think it's like it's really based on your position. I think what you're thinking more so is excellent power almost.
Yeah.
But
I feel like that kind of plays back to like the first chapter, how it covered like narcissistic leaders and Machiavellian leaders, how, you know, they get to their positions by, you know, kind of playing the system, kind of being like a player in the game and kind of presenting themselves as a good leader, even though they have ulterior motives. And I feel like that's another way, like, someone could get legitimate power while being a weak leader, or at least being a bad leader, you know, having awful qualities, and like their goals are going to be different than the organizational or the group goals. And they're kind of just working towards, you know, their own goal while kind of playing this, you know, hey, I have legitimate power, so you have to listen to me, even though what I'm saying, you know, isn't going to help the group in any way, you know?
yeah, so I think like going back to your original question of like if it's positive or negative, I think it can really go both ways. I think it just
Absolutely.
it's about the person.
We haven't talked about ecological at all. But it seems like in general, these all kind of just flow into each other. Like you could be multiple, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't see how ecological can stand on its own. And in the textbook, it says it's available with those with legitimate power. I didn't fully understand that one.
Yeah, I don't either. It also says that it rises out of control over the physical environment, technology, and how work is organized. And then, like, it gave examples of, like, designing a layout of manufacturing assembly line and selling new software programs, and that's nothing that, like, I've personally had to deal with. So, like, I'm not, and it's not something that I've really seen a whole bunch. I feel like that's so far above me in, like, Starbucks company where it's just, I don't have a good example of that to, like, base this off of.
Right.
I mean, the first thing that came to mind when I read that was like how a superintendent can like move teachers around how they want. There's actually this big, huge thing in my hometown where one of the kindergarten teachers got moved up to 8th grade, and she thought it was a punishment, and like the school board and her, and it was a big hullabaloo because she was upset that she got moved, and he was kind of using his ecological power to move her. And, you know, she kind of saw that as a negative, and it was just a huge thing. But I guess he had to have had legitimate power to do that first off. So it definitely plays off of that, but I see how that can be an issue. That was a huge thing. People were very upset.
Yeah, it seems like, yeah, you have to be already in power to even be able to use ecological power.
Yeah.
So for the question, it says, finally, how might a person's argumentative style impact or tie to their use of power? That's just a question for this discussion as well.
I mean, I guess that how you communicate is going to depend on how people see your power. Because obviously, if you're bad at communicating, they'll just see you as, a legitimate leader and not, a reverent leader.
Yeah, the book said like the leader should be a negotiator, not an attacker. Or it was something along those lines. And that kind of makes sense because if you are an attacker, no one's going to people are just going to avoid you. And you can't really lead with that lack of communication where people are trying to, upward dissertation where they don't tell people above them what's going on because they don't want to deal with the blowback. So
yeah,
you have
wasn't that a disengaged follower?
Yeah.
I feel like it ties in because just in communication in general, how you communicate is just a manifestation of who you are, what kind of power you have. So it's just a reflection of who the person is.
Yeah. And big thing, especially when problem solving, they also said this in the book. They're talking about how it's important that you remove the people from the problem, and that way it'll prevent people from getting all emotional about it. You just go over what the problem is, then you can kind of plug in the answers, and from there you want to come up with multiple solutions, and you kind of you find one that everyone agrees on, and then that's kind of the best route to go. And everyone it's very democratic, I guess, because everyone gets their opinions heard.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're at 17 minutes. Any last word?
That one quick?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
No, I think we're good.
Alrighty, sounds good. I'm stopping.